The prison ship moved slowly through the dark space between stars. It was called the Eternal Silence, and it was the largest prison in the Dominion fleet. The ship was old and cold and cruel, just like the creatures who ran it. Inside the metal walls, thousands of prisoners lived in tiny cells. They came from many different planets. Some had scales. Some had feathers. Some had too many eyes or not enough arms. But they all shared one thing. They were all afraid of the Wardens. The Wardens were called the Vashiri. They stood 8 feet tall and had 4 arms. Their skin was gray like stone, and their eyes glowed yellow in the dark hallways. They carried electric staffs that could make a grown man scream and fall to the ground. The Vashiri believed they were the strongest species in the galaxy. They believed all other creatures were weak and meant to serve them. In cell block 7, on the lowest level of the ship, there was a small cell in the corner. Inside that cell sat a human girl. Her name was Lily, and she was 8 years old. Lily had brown hair that hung past her shoulders. It was dirty now, tangled and messy from weeks without proper washing. Her clothes were torn. Her shoes had holes. But her eyes were sharp and dark and always watching. She never cried. She never screamed. She just sat in a corner and watched everything. The Vashiri had taken her from a refugee ship. Her parents had died in the attack. She remembered the fire and the screaming and the way her mother had pushed her into a storage compartment. She remembered hiding there for hours until the Vashiri found her and dragged her out. They had laughed at her. A human child. Worthless. Weak. Not even worth selling as a slave. They threw her in cell block 7 with the other forgotten prisoners and expected her to die quietly. But Lily was not alone. In her arms, she held a small animal with coarse gray and white fur. It had a flat head and small round ears and black eyes that gleamed with something fierce. It was a honey badger, and his name was Duke. Duke had been her birthday present 2 years ago. Her father had found him at an exotic animal rescue on Earth. Honey badgers were rare pets, and most people thought they were too mean to keep. But Duke had loved Lily from the first moment he saw her. He slept in her bed every night. He followed her everywhere. When the attack came, Lily had grabbed him and stuffed him in her backpack without thinking. Now he was all she had left. The other prisoners in cell block 7 watched the girl with curiosity. Most of them had never seen a human before. Humans were new to the galaxy. They had only discovered space travel 50 years ago. The Dominion considered them a minor species, barely worth noticing. But there was one other human in cell block 7. His name was Frank, and he was in the cell next to Lily. Frank was old. His hair was gray, and his face was covered with wrinkles. He had been a smuggler before the Vashiri caught him. He had lived in space for 40 years and knew things that most humans never learned. On Lily's first night in the cell, Frank had pressed his face against the bars and whispered to her, "Hey, kid, you okay?" Lily had looked at him with those dark, quiet eyes. She did not answer. "That's all right," Frank said. "You don't have to talk. Just know that you're not alone. We humans stick together out here." Days passed. Then weeks. Lily learned the rhythm of the prison. Wake up when the lights turned on. Eat the gray paste they called food. Stay quiet when the wardens walked by. Sleep when the lights turned off. The head warden was a Vashiri named Thalmok. He was bigger than the others, with scars on his face from old battles. He liked to walk through the cell blocks and look at the prisoners. He liked to see the fear in their eyes. Sometimes he would shock a random prisoner just to hear them scream. It made him feel powerful. Thalmok noticed Lily on her 3rd day. He stopped in front of her cell and stared down at her. "A human child," he said. His voice was deep and rough like rocks grinding together. "How pathetic. Your species is nothing. weak little creatures with soft skin and dull teeth. You will die in here, and no one will remember you. Lily looked up at him. She did not look away. She did not blink. Something flickered in Thalmok's yellow eyes. It might have been surprise. It might have been annoyance. He snorted and walked away. Frank watched from his cell. He let out a slow breath. "Careful, kid," he whispered. "Don't draw attention to yourself." But Lily just stroked Duke's fur and said nothing. The weeks continued. Lily grew thinner. The food was bad, and there was never enough. But she always shared with Duke. She would hide bits of the gray paste in her hands and feed him when the guards were not looking. The other prisoners began to whisper about her. The strange human child who never cried. The girl with the small furry creature that growled at anyone who came too close. Some of them felt sorry for her. A young Kovazi miner named Bello would sometimes slide his extra food through the bars toward her cell. A Zeleth trader with 6 eyes would sing soft songs at night to help her sleep. But others thought she was strange, wrong. The Morthani assassin in cell block 6 watched her with cold interest. The Morthani were killers who respected only strength. They saw something in the girl's eyes that the others missed. Frank saw it too. He had lived long enough to know that quiet did not mean weak. Still waters ran deep, as the old earth saying went. One night he pressed close to the bars and spoke softly. "That animal of yours, what is it?" Lily looked at him for a long moment. Then she spoke for the first time since arriving. "His name is Duke. He's a honey badger." Frank's eyebrows rose. He had heard of honey badgers. Every human had. They were famous on Earth for being the most fearless animals alive. They fought lions. They ate venomous snakes. They never gave up, never backed down, never stopped fighting. "A honey badger," Frank repeated slowly. He looked at the small creature in Lily's arms. Duke stared back at him with those black, fierce eyes. "Well, I'll be damned." He started to laugh softly. "What's funny?" Lily asked. Frank shook his head. "Nothing, kid. Just thinking that these Vashiri have no idea what they've brought onto their ship." Lily tilted her head. She did not understand. But she would. Soon. Everyone would. On the 42nd day, everything changed. The 42nd day began like every other day on the eternal silence. The lights buzzed on with a harsh white glow. The prisoners woke slowly in their cells. The gray paste was delivered through slots in the doors. Everything was normal. Then Thalmok came for his inspection. The head warden liked to walk through the cell blocks in the morning. He said it was to check for problems. But everyone knew the real reason. He wanted to see the prisoners cower. He wanted to feel powerful. He wanted to remind everyone that he was in control, and they were nothing. Thalmok walked slowly through cell block 7. His forearms hung at his sides. His electric staff crackled with blue energy. His yellow eyes moved from cell to cell, looking for any sign of defiance. The prisoners looked away. They always looked away. Even the fierce ones, the killers and the fighters, knew better than to meet Thalmok's gaze. But Lily was different. When Thalmok reached her cell, she was sitting in her usual corner. Duke was curled in her lap, his gray and white fur rising and falling with each breath. She was stroking him gently, whispering something too soft to hear. Thalmok stopped. He pressed his face close to the bars and stared at her. "Still alive, little human?" he said with a cruel smile. "I am surprised. Your kind is so fragile. I thought you would have died by now." Lily did not answer. She just kept stroking Duke. Thalmok's eyes moved to the animal. He had seen it before, but never paid attention. Now he looked closer. The creature was small, smaller than his hand. It had a flat head and tiny ears, and black eyes that watched him without fear. "What is that thing?" Thalmok demanded. Lily looked up at him. Her face showed no emotion. His name is Duke, she said quietly. He's a honey badger. Thalmok had never heard of a honey badger. The Vashiri did not care about Earth animals. They did not care about anything from that small, weak planet at the edge of the galaxy. It looks pathetic, Thalmok said. Like everything else from your world. He reached through the bars. His gray hand grabbed Duke by the loose skin on his neck and pulled him away from Lily. Duke snarled. It was a sound unlike anything the aliens had heard before. Low and mean and full of rage. The honey badger twisted in Thalmok's grip, trying to bite. Thalmok laughed. The sound echoed through the cell block. This tiny thing has spirit, he said. How amusing. Then he threw Duke against the far wall. The honey badger hit the metal with a hard thud. He fell to the ground and lay still. Lily stood up slowly. Her hands were shaking, but not with fear. Something darker burned in her eyes. Thalmok watched her with amusement. Did that upset you, little human? Did I hurt your pet? Across the floor, Duke stirred. The honey badger pushed himself up on his short legs. He shook his head. Then he turned toward Thalmok and snarled again. The head warden's eyes widened slightly. The creature should have been dead, or at least broken. He had thrown it hard enough to shatter bones, but the honey badger stood there, teeth bared, ready to fight. Thalmok felt a flicker of annoyance. He stepped toward the animal and kicked it with his heavy boot. Duke flew across the corridor and slammed into the opposite wall. This time, he did not move. Lily's voice came out in a whisper. It was soft and cold and carried through the sudden silence of the cell block. You shouldn't have done that. Thalmok turned to look at her. He expected tears. He expected screaming. He expected the weak, pathetic response that all small creatures gave when they lost something they loved. But Lily just stood there. Her dark eyes locked onto his. And in those eyes, Thalmok saw something that made him feel strange. It was not fear. It was not anger. It was something patient. Something waiting. He did not like it. Stupid child, he muttered. He turned and walked away, his staff crackling at his side. The other prisoners watched him go. Then they looked at Lily. She had not moved. She had not cried. She just stood there, staring at the spot where Duke had fallen. Frank pressed his face against his cell bars. Lily, he whispered. Lily, are you okay? She did not answer. Then, across the corridor, something moved. Duke's eyes opened. They were black and shining and full of hate. The honey badger pushed himself up again. He shook his body like a dog shaking off water. He tested his legs one by one. They all worked. Honey badgers have loose skin. Very loose. It lets them twist around and bite anything that grabs them. It also protects them from damage. Claws and teeth slide off. Kicks and throws do not break bones the way they should. Duke was hurt. His body ached. But he was not broken. And he was very, very angry. The honey badger looked toward Thalmok's retreating back. Then he looked at Lily. Their eyes met through the bars. Something passed between them. An understanding. A promise. Duke turned and trotted toward the wall. There was a small vent near the floor, a gap in the metal panels where air flowed between sections of the ship. It was tiny. Too small for any prisoner to use. Too small for the guards to worry about. But Duke was not a prisoner. He was a honey badger. And honey badgers could fit into spaces that seemed impossible. He squeezed his body through the gap and disappeared into the darkness. Lily sat back down in her corner. She pulled her knees to her chest and rested her chin on them. For the first time since arriving on the ship, she smiled. It was a small smile. Quiet. Patient. The other prisoners watched her with confusion. The girl's pet was gone. The head warden had heard it, maybe killed it. Why was she smiling? Frank understood. His old smuggler's brain put the pieces together. He remembered what honey badgers were famous for. He remembered the stories from Earth about animals that fought creatures 10 times their size. Animals that never stopped, never gave up, never forgot. "Oh no," Frank whispered to himself. "Oh, those poor stupid bastards." Night fell on the eternal silence. The lights dimmed to their sleeping level. The prisoners settled into their uncomfortable beds. The guards took their positions and began their patrol. Everything was quiet. Then the screaming started. It came from the Warden quarters, 3 levels above cell block 7. High, sharp, terrible screaming. The sound of someone in great pain. The sound of someone who had just learned what fear really meant. Alarms began to blare. Red lights flashed in the corridors. Guards ran past the cells with their weapons ready, but they did not know what they were looking for. They did not know that the threat was already inside the walls, already moving through the vents, already hunting. In her cell, Lily closed her eyes and listened to the screaming. "Good boy, Duke," she whispered. "Good boy." The screaming lasted for 3 hours. When the morning lights finally buzzed on, the prisoners of cell block 7 saw something they had never seen before. Fear on the faces of the guards. The Vashiri wardens walked through the corridors with their weapons raised. Their yellow eyes darted to every shadow, every corner, every vent. They jumped at small sounds. They shouted at each other in their harsh language. Something was hunting them, and they did not know what it was. Frank sat at the front of his cell and watched them with quiet satisfaction. He had not slept all night. None of the prisoners had. But while the others were confused and scared, Frank understood exactly what was happening. "What is going on?" whispered Bello, the young Korvathi miner. His green scales had turned pale with worry. "What is making them so afraid?" Frank glanced at Lily's cell. The girl was sitting in her usual corner, calm and still, like she was waiting for something. "Revenge," Frank said simply. "That's what's going on." By midday, the rumors had spread through the entire ship. 3 guards were in the medical bay. One had lost 2 fingers. Another had deep cuts across his face. The third had been bitten so many times that the doctors could not count all the wounds. They all told the same story. Something small and fast had attacked them in the dark. It came from the walls, from the ceiling, from places they could not see. It bit and clawed and would not stop. When they grabbed it, it twisted in their hands and bit them again. When they hit it, it got back up and attacked harder. "A demon," one of them gasped. "A demon from the human's hell." The Vashiri did not believe in demons, but they were starting to wonder. Thalmok was furious. He stood in the command center and screamed at his officers. His yellow eyes burned with rage. "Find it!" he roared. "Find it and kill it. It is just a small animal. How can you be so afraid of something so small?" But the officers did not have an answer. They had never faced anything like this before. The creatures they conquered were always big and easy to see. They fought with claws and teeth and strength. They could be shot and killed. This thing was different. It was small and fast and clever. It hid in places they could not reach. It struck when they did not expect it. And no matter how many times they heard it, it kept coming back. In cell block 7, Frank began to laugh. A guard stopped in front of his cell. "What is so funny, human?" Frank looked up at the towering alien with a grin on his wrinkled face. "You fools," he said. "You absolute fools. You have no idea what you have done." The guard raised his electric staff. "Explain yourself. That animal you kicked yesterday? The one that belonged to the girl?" Frank shook his head slowly. "That is a honey badger." "Do you know what a honey badger is?" The guard said nothing. "Of course you don't," Frank continued. You never bothered to learn about Earth. You thought we were weak. You thought our animals were weak. But you were wrong. He leaned closer to the bars. Honey badgers are the meanest, toughest, most stubborn creatures on our entire planet. They fight lions. They eat venomous snakes. They break into beehives and let 1,000 bees sting them just to get the honey inside. Nothing stops them. Nothing scares them. They don't know how to quit. The guard shifted uncomfortably. And here's the best part, Frank said with a dark smile. That thing is just a baby compared to what else we keep as pets. The guard's yellow eyes widened. Frank turned to look at the other prisoners who were listening. He raised his voice so everyone could hear. Do you know what species we humans domesticated first? Wolves. We took the most dangerous hunters on our planet and made them our friends. Now they guard our homes and play with our children. He pointed at the guard. We keep snakes that can kill with a single bite. We raise cats that have claws like knives. We train horses that weigh 1,000 pounds to carry us on their backs. We swim with sharks. We sleep with predators. We turn monsters into family. The prisoners stared at him. The guards stared at him. Even Lily looked up from her corner with something like pride in her dark eyes. That little girl is 8 years old, Frank said. And she brought a honey badger onto this ship. Not as a weapon. As a friend. As a comfort. That is what humans do. We bond with dangerous things. We love them, and they love us back. He laughed again. You kicked her pet. You hurt the one thing she loves. And now the creature is going to tear this ship apart until it gets revenge. That is not a demon hunting your guards. That is loyalty. That is love. And you have absolutely no idea how to stop it. The guard struck Frank across the face with his staff. Frank fell back, blood dripping from his lip, but he kept laughing. Kill me if you want, he said. It won't help. That thing isn't going to stop until it makes you pay. That is what we teach our animals. That is what we teach ourselves. Never give up. Never surrender. Never stop fighting. The guard stormed away. But Frank's words spread through the ship like wildfire. The other prisoners began to look at the humans differently. Before, they had thought humans were weak. Small and soft and fragile. Not worth respecting. But now they understood something new. Humans were not weak. Humans were insane. They took the most dangerous creatures on their world and made them into companions. They surrounded themselves with predators and called them pets. They loved things that could kill them and trusted those things to love them back. And when someone hurt what they loved, they did not stop until justice was done. The Morthani assassin in cell block 6 nodded slowly when he heard the story. His people respected strength above all else. And there was a certain kind of strength in what the humans did. Not physical strength. Something deeper. Something harder to break. Bello, the Korvati miner, looked at Lily with new eyes. He had given her food because he felt sorry for her. Now he realized she did not need his pity. She was stronger than any of them. Even the zealous trader with 6 eyes stopped singing his soft songs at night. Instead, he watched Lily with something like awe. And in the walls of the ship, Duke kept hunting. He found more guards that night. And the night after. He was patient and clever and full of endless rage. He remembered the hands that had grabbed him. He remembered the boot that had kicked him. He remembered the way Lily had whispered his name. The guards stopped sleeping. They started traveling in groups. They sealed the vents with metal plates, but Duke found other ways in. He always found a way. On the 5th day, Valmok finally came to cell block 7 himself. He stood in front of Lily's cell. His face was pale. His forearms hung at his sides. He did not look powerful anymore. He looked tired. He looked scared. Call it off, he said. His voice was rough and desperate. Call off your creature, I will give you better food. A bigger cell. Anything you want. Just make it stop." Lily looked up at him. Her dark eyes were calm and cold. "You kicked him," she said simply. "He's angry now. I can't stop him. I wouldn't even if I could." She tilted her head slightly. "I told you that you shouldn't have done that." Thalmok stood there for a long moment. Then he turned and walked away. His shoulders were slumped. His head was down. He had learned a lesson that his species had never learned before. Some creatures were not meant to be conquered. Some creatures did not understand surrender. Some creatures fought until they won or died, and nothing in between. Humans were those creatures, and so were their pets. 2 weeks passed after Thalmok begged Lily to call off her honey badger. Nothing changed. Duke kept hunting. Guards kept screaming. Fear kept spreading through the ship like a disease. But something else was spreading too. Something the Vashiri had never seen on their prison ship, the Hope. It started with whispers. Prisoners talking to each other through the bars of their cells. Stories being passed from block to block. The tale of the little human girl and her fearless pet. The creature that would not stop fighting. The animal that made the mighty Vashiri tremble. Frank noticed it first. He had been in prisons before. He knew what broken prisoners looked like. They kept their heads down. They did not meet each other's eyes. They survived each day and waited to die. But now the prisoners were looking up. They were watching the guards with something new in their faces. Not fear, not submission. Something sharper. Something dangerous. Hope could be more powerful than any weapon. Frank decided it was time to act. He started talking to the other humans on the ship. There were not many of them. A mechanic named Bobby, who had been caught stealing ship parts. A former Marine named Clyde, who had fought against the Dominion before they captured him. A doctor named Grace, who had been healing rebels in the outer colonies. They met in whispers, passing messages through the prisoner network. Bobby knew the ship's systems. Clyde knew how to fight. Grace knew how to keep people alive. And Frank knew how to plan. But they could not do it alone. Frank reached out to the other species. The Kavathi miners were strong and angry. Their planet had been stripped bare by the Dominion, and they had nothing left to lose. Bello agreed to help without hesitation. The Zealot traders were clever and sneaky. They had contacts everywhere. The six-eyed trader agreed to spread the word to other cell blocks. The hardest to convince were the Morthani assassins. They did not trust anyone. They did not work with others. They killed for money, not for causes. But Frank did not ask them to join. He just told them a story. "You respect strength," he said to the Morthani in Cell Block 6. "You think the Vashiri are strong because they have weapons and numbers. But real strength is not about that. Real strength is about will. About never giving up. About fighting until you win." He pointed toward Lily's cell far below. "That little girl is 8 years old. She lost her parents. She was thrown into this prison to die. She has no weapons, no training, no power. But she has brought this entire ship to its knees with one small animal and the will to never surrender." Frank met the Morthani's cold eyes. "That is strength. And if you want to be on the winning side, you should think about what happens when creatures like that decide to fight together." The Morthani said nothing. But when the time came, they were ready. The moment arrived on a quiet night, 3 weeks after the kicking Duke had found his way into the power junction. It was deep in the ship's core, protected by thick walls and heavy doors. The guards thought it was safe. They were wrong. The honey badger spent 2 hours chewing through wires and cables. His teeth were strong enough to crack bones. Electrical insulation was nothing to him. He worked patiently, remembering the layout he had learned while crawling through the walls. When he chewed through the final cable, every restraint collar on Blocks 5, Soon 9 went dead. 2,000 prisoners felt the buzz around their necks suddenly stop. For a moment, they did not understand. They touched their collars with shaking hands. They looked at each other with wide eyes. Then they understood. They were free. The alarm started screaming. Red lights flashed everywhere. Guards ran through the corridors with their weapons raised, shouting orders that no one followed. It was too late. The Kavathi miners hit them first. They were strong and angry and had been waiting for this moment for years. They grabbed guards and threw them against walls. They took their weapons and turned them on their former masters. The Zealoth traders jammed the communication systems. No distress signal would leave the ship. No help would come. The Morthani assassins moved through the shadows like ghosts. Guards died without seeing who killed them. Officers were found in their quarters with their throats cut, and the humans coordinated it all. Bobby had taken control of the engine room. He locked the doors and kept the ship stable while chaos raged around him. Without him, the eternal silence would have torn itself apart. Clyde led the assault on the armory. He was old and gray, but he still remembered how to fight. The guards who faced him learned that human Marines did not forget their training. Even after years in prison, Gray set up a medical station in the mess hall. She treated the wounded from both sides because that was what doctors did. Even some guards came to her when their own medical bay was overrun, and Frank walked through it all with a calm smile on his face. He had planned this moment for weeks. He had seen all the pieces and known how they would fit together. He had taken hope and turned it into action. But the true symbol of the uprising was not any of them. It was Lily. She walked through the chaos like a ghost. Her small feet stepped over bodies and debris. Her dark eyes looked straight ahead. Duke trotted at her heels, his gray fur stained with old blood, and new wounds that he did not seem to feel. The prisoners saw her and stopped fighting to stare. The girl who had started it all, the child who had refused to break. She did not carry a weapon. She did not shout orders. She just walked, calm and steady, toward the command center. Guards saw her coming and ran the other way. By the time she reached the command center doors, there was no one left to stop her. The prisoners had taken control of the corridor. Clyde and his fighters stood guard at every entrance. Frank walked up beside her. "You ready, kid?" he asked. Lily looked at the heavy metal doors. Behind them was Thalmok, the creature who had kicked Duke, the creature who had laughed at her weakness. "Yes," she said. Bobby's voice came through the stolen communicator. "Doors are unlocked. Go get him." The doors slid open. Thalmok was inside, crouched behind the command console. His electric staff was in his hands, but it was shaking. His yellow eyes were wide with terror. He saw the small girl standing in the doorway. He saw the blood-stained honey badger at her feet. He saw the crowd of prisoners behind her, watching in silence. "Please," he said. His voice cracked. "Please, I will give you anything. The ship, your freedom, anything you want. Just don't." Lily walked forward slowly. Duke growled low in his throat. "You kicked him," Lily said. Her voice was quiet but clear. "I told you that you shouldn't have done that." She stopped in front of him. "You thought we were weak. You thought we would just die quietly in our cells. But humans don't die quietly. We fight. We never stop fighting. And we never forget who hurt us." She looked down at Duke. The honey badger looked up at her. Something passed between them. Then Lily stepped aside. Duke lunged. Thalmok's scream echoed through the command center. It was the last scream he ever made. When it was over, Lily picked up Duke and held him close. The honey badger was breathing hard, but his black eyes were satisfied. "Good boy," she whispered into his fur. "Good boy." Frank walked up beside her and looked at the fallen warden. "Wow," he said. "I think we just started a revolution." Lily stroked Duke's fur gently. "No," she said. "He started it. I just let him finish." Frank laughed. Outside the command center, the prisoners of the Eternal Silence celebrated their freedom. But the galaxy had not yet learned what had happened. It would take months for the story to spread. When it did, everything would change. The Eternal Silence was never heard from again. At least, not by the Dominion. For 3 months, the galaxy wondered what had happened to the massive prison ship. The Dominion sent search parties. They scanned every sector. They offered rewards for information. Nothing. Then, one day, a battered ship limped into human-controlled space. Its engines were dying. Its hull was covered with burn marks from a dozen small battles. Its transponder broadcast a signal that made the human patrol ships freeze in shock. It was the Eternal Silence. The human navy surrounded it with weapons ready. They expected an attack. A trap. Something dangerous. Instead, they got a message. "This is the prisoner collective of the former Dominion vessel Eternal Silence. We are requesting asylum. We have 2,000 free prisoners from 12 species aboard. We are not armed and we are not hostile. Please help us." The voice was old and tired and human. It was Frank. The Navy brought the ship in carefully. Medical teams waited on the docks. Security forces stood ready for trouble. But there was no trouble. The prisoners came off the ship slowly. Kovathi Myers with tears in their eyes. Zeleth traders laughing with joy. Morthani assassins walking calmly into custody, knowing they had earned their freedom. And humans. A mechanic named Bobby. A Marine named Clyde. A doctor named Grace. And at the end of the line, a small girl with brown hair and dark eyes. Carrying a gray and white animal in her arms. The news spread across the galaxy like wildfire. Prison ship taken by its own prisoners. A Dominion head warden killed by a creature no bigger than a house cat. An uprising started by an 8-year-old human girl. And her pet. The Dominion was furious. They sent diplomats to human space. They demanded the return of the girl. They demanded justice for their dead warden. They threatened war. The human ambassador was a sharp-eyed woman named Patricia. She had gray hair and a face that showed no fear. She sat across from the Dominion representatives in a small room on Earth's capital station. "You want the child?" she asked calmly. "She is a criminal," the Dominion diplomat snarled. "She led a rebellion. She killed our officer. She must be punished." Patricia looked at him for a long moment. "Let me tell you a story," she said. "That child was captured during a raid on a refugee convoy. Her parents were killed in front of her. She was thrown into a prison cell to die. She was 8 years old. The diplomat said nothing. She survived for 6 weeks in your prison. Then one of your wardens kicked her pet. Kicked a small animal that was all she had left in the universe. And you are surprised that she fought back?" Patricia leaned forward. "That is what humans do. When you push us, we push back. When you hurt what we love, we make you pay. It is not cruelty. It is not evil. It is simple. It is survival. And it is something you should have learned before you started taking our people prisoner." The diplomat's eyes narrowed. "Is that a threat?" "No," Patricia said. "It is a warning. You want to come get her? By all means, try." She smiled coldly. "But remember what happened to the last warden who thought humans were weak. The Dominion did not come for Lily. They filed protests. They made speeches. They promised revenge. But they did not come because the story had spread too far. Every species in the galaxy had heard about the little human girl and her honey badger. They had heard about the uprising. They had heard about what happened when someone hurt what a human loved, and they were afraid, not of human armies, not of human weapons, but of human spirit. That strange, stubborn, endless world that made them bond with monsters and turn them into friends. That made them fight when they should have surrendered. That made them dangerous in ways that size and strength could not measure. Lily went home. Her grandmother lived in a small town in Montana, far from the cities and the spaceports and the politics. It was quiet there. Green hills and blue skies and the smell of pine trees. Lily's grandmother was a small woman with gray hair and kind eyes. She held Lily for a long time when they first met again. She did not ask questions. She did not push. She just held her. Duke slept at the foot of Lily's bed every night. He was old now. His fur was turning gray around his muzzle, but his eyes were still fierce. And when Lily had nightmares about the prison, he would crawl up beside her and press his warm body against hers until she calmed down. The survivors sent her things. Drawings from Kovathi children who had heard her story. Letters from Zealoth traders who owed their freedom to her. Even a small knife from the Morthani, a sign of respect from a species that respected very few. She hung them all on her wall. Years passed. Lily grew up. She went to school. She made friends. She learned to smile again, to laugh again, to live a normal life. But she never forgot. When she was 18, she started studying to be a veterinarian. She wanted to help animals, to heal them, to give them the same love and protection that Duke had given her. Frank came to visit her once, many years after the uprising. He was very old now, his hair thin and white, his body bent with age. But his eyes still sparkled with that same clever light. They sat on her grandmother's porch and watched Duke sleeping in a patch of sunlight. The honey badger was ancient, his movements slow, but he still lifted his head to greet visitors with a warning growl. "Why animals?" Frank asked. Lily smiled and scratched behind Duke's ears. "Because humans don't survive alone," she said. "We never have. We are weak and soft and fragile. But we don't stay that way. We find creatures stronger than us, faster than us, deadlier than us. And we make them our friends." She looked at Duke with love in her eyes. "We bring our monsters with us. We trust them with our lives. We teach them to love us, and we love them back. That's what makes us dangerous. Not our armies, not our weapons, but our bonds." Frank nodded slowly. "You taught the whole galaxy that lesson," he said. "No," Lily replied. "Duke did. I just gave him the chance." Frank laughed, then coughed. He was old and tired and would not live much longer. But he had seen something beautiful in his life. He had seen a little girl and a honey badger change the course of history. "You know," he said, "they still tell stories about you. Out there in the galaxy. The child who whispered. The warden who kicked the wrong animal. It's become a legend." Lily shrugged. "It's just the truth," she said. "Don't hurt what humans love. We bite back." Duke opened one black eye and looked at her. Then he closed it again and went back to sleep, content and safe and home. The sun set over Montana. The stars came out, the same stars where the eternal silence had once drifted. Somewhere out there, empires rose and fell. Wars were fought. Species conquered and were conquered. But in a small house at the edge of a small town, an old woman sat with an old honey badger and watched the night. She was not afraid of anything. She never had been and across the galaxy. In the halls of power and the cells of prisoners and the ships of travelers, they told stories about her. About what happened when you hurt what a human loved. About the price you paid for cruelty. They remembered the warden who kicked the bird, Ratel, and they remembered what the child whispered. "You shouldn't have done that." It became a saying, a warning, a law that every species learned to follow. Do not touch what humans love. They will never stop fighting. They will never forget. And they always bite back.